We're going to show a second way to export the displacement maps. This one is a bit easier because everything is automatic and you can set things up to run in basically a batch. What we showed you before was a very manual process of getting out the displacement maps and color maps one shell at a time. This way it will do everything all at once and you can walk away from the computer, come back and see that everything's done. This will require a plugin. It's a free plugin. You go to Pixologic's website and download it. It is the multi-map exporter. For now I am just going to export the displacement. I'm not going to bother with texture maps or anything like that, but as you can see you can export the mesh and the textures as well. I'm going to set it automatically to 4K. I'm going to have it flip in the vertical because Zbrush likes everything upside down for some strange reason. So we're going to go into the export options under displacement map. The min value is going to be 0.5. What that's basically going to mean is that on a scale of 0 to 1, 0 being completely black and 1 being completely white, the middle ground is going to be 0.5. Now Maya likes everything at 0 and everything being in elevation. Adaptive, UV, subdivision level. We need to tell it what subdivision level is going to be the top level one. Now this is the one caveat of this method. You see that we're on subdivision 6, but we're not exporting on subdivision 1. We're exporting on subdivision 2, which has a few extra polys to it. When you come here, you're telling it what is the top level subdivision, not the bottom. It'll automatically assume that you want it at the lowest subdivision. And in this case we don't. So what we have to do is we have to come over here and delete the lowest subdivision level. That's not really a big deal. We just got to remember not to save out the tool. And if we do save out the tool and forget that we have another level underneath here that we deleted, we can always regenerate by using the reconstruct sub-D level. If I come in here and click that, I'll take a minute. And now we have our subdivision 1 back. And then our 12,000 polys is subdivision 2 again. So it's not really that big of a deal to delete it. We'll try to remember not to save it, and if we do, we can always get it back, so it's not that big of a deal. So now we're exporting from 5 down to what is now 1. And then we hit create maps, and what it will do is it will bake out each shell one at a time. So here we have our dog monster all pulled in, scaled up to be about 4 feet high, centered more or less around the origin. I mean, he is kind of a weird lopsided dude. It's hard to center him, but he was made asymmetric very much on purpose. That was part of the look of the creature, to make it very unnatural looking by having it so uneven and awkward looking. So I'm just going to soften the normals real quick, just so it doesn't look all faceted like it was. That's a little better. And notice I haven't bothered with the horns and the tongue yet. We'll get to that later. As you can see here, it's about 12,000 faces or 24,000 triangles. When you're looking at your polygon count, it's always best to look at triangles because that's your lowest common denominator. If you have anything less than a triangle, it's basically a bug. Older versions of Maya have actually been able to do things where I squeeze a face down to an individual line. You're not supposed to be able to do that, but I don't know if you can do it in the current version of Maya, but in older ones, Maya would actually allow you to compress all the verts till you had nothing but a single line, which is bad because it can't render that way. That's actually bad. But you could conceivably have like one big huge polygon that was like 1,000 sides to it, and it would read as one face because it was one big solid face, but it would also display as like 2,000 triangles or whatever it would turn out to be. Triangles is as accurate as it's going to get in terms of polygon count. Faces can be a bit ambiguous if you have quads or tris or insided polygons or anything weird like that. So we got our guy here. We're going to start by bringing in the displacement maps. We have 4 UV shells. I'm just going to set up 4 simple blends. Okay, so next thing we need to do is set up the displacements. So if you map this out, the funny thing about displacements is that they actually don't go here on the shader. They go over here to the shading engine. So we click here, and we're going to add a file texture to that. And of course, that file texture will be change all the colors back to gray now, just so you can better see what's going on. And if we render this, it should look like pretty much like garbage. Okay, that just looks like a big old thing of mud. Why are we not getting any good displacements? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, Maya has its own way of doing displacement maps, and it's not really working well with Mental Ray. So what we need to do is select our monster here under the Shape tab, under the Displacement map, all this feature displacement. This is the Maya way of rendering. This is what needs to be set up if you're rendering through the Maya software renderer. But we're not using the Maya software renderer, we are using Mental Ray, so we need to disable this, turn all this off. So if we render it now, it's still going to look pretty much like mud. Okay, we see we can get some of the detail coming in, but it still looks kind of screwy. Now, why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Again, if you look at our textured nodes, this is Maya 2011. It doesn't like tips very well. So here's our torso. Zbrush has managed to export everything upside down, even though we told it to flip it. So either I accidentally flipped it twice, or it ignored it. So there's two things we can do. We can either flip them in Photoshop, or we can flip them here in the UV placement node. You can see here we got the rotate UVs. If you rotate that 180, that should have the same effect as flipping it. But I want to go ahead and just bring them up in Photoshop and fix them right. So it should start looking a little bit better. Alright, well, it's still looking kind of like mud, but at least we're starting to see the pieces are working. We can see some the displacement here and around here, but we're still not getting the same kind of detail as we're getting in ZBrush. It still looks a lot like a big glob of mud. The reason for that is because nothing is telling Mental Ray to add more geometry that we need in order to get that kind of detail. So what we need to do is go into Rendering Editors, Mental Ray Approximation Editor. So we're going to create a Mental Ray Approximation node. We're going to set it to Spatial to get it match what was in ZBrush. ZBrush comes all the way to Subdivision 6, but we exported on 2, so we only need to divide it 5 times. So 0 to 5 is going to work fine. I'm going to set the length to something small like 0.1, and I'm going to set it as view dependent. What that's going to mean is it's going to base it on pixels. What this is going to be is it's going to be a tolerance, and if this displacement needs to happen within 0.1 pixels of each other, then it will happen. Otherwise it will not subdivide that area and skip it. And that can be handy if he's across the screen or whatever, so it's not displacing as much, because it's kind of like having a built-in level of detail. So let's go ahead and render him again and see what happens now. Okay, so we're starting to see some of the detail in here, but it still looks kind of soft and muddy. The reason for that should be that we have a different color for our neutral gray here than what Maya wants. Zbrush will take a middle color, and then black is a depression and white is an elevation. Maya likes everything to be at a base level of black, so everything is an elevation off of the black. What we need to do is we need to shift the color values down so that this middle gray becomes relatively 0 according to Maya. So if we come in here to the color balance, if we increase this to 2.2 and this to -1.1, it should do the trick. There we go. Now we're starting to see the displacement. Notice how the blisters are popping up a lot more. These bony ridges have that same kind of chiseled unevenness that we had in Zbrush. Very organic look up in here in the face of what we had. We're seeing the cuts here with where the muscles are striated. So there we go. Now we got our displacements working the way they should be working. Alright, so I wanted to show the difference between bump map and displacement map. Right now the bump's coming in kind of screwy, but the important thing is if you switch it to alpha mode, this is the one that's bump map, and you look at the edges, and like right around here it's very, very smooth, whereas over here you're seeing all the different dips and ridges. And that's really the main difference between displacement and bump, is that bump is creating the illusion of all this detail, whereas displacement is actually creating the detail. And so that's it for now. We will continue on this later, where we will start setting up our color shader and a fast skin shader and making the sky look more than just displaced gray. Thank you very much.